Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the committee of the, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of Perth and Kinross Licensing Committee. I'm Bailey Mike Williamson, convener of the committee. I'm joined by my vice convener, Councillor Ian McPherson. I'm also joined by other members of the committee. On my left is Moyna McLaren, Deputy Clerk and Solicitor to the committee, and on my right is Adam Taylor, the Clerk to the committee. Also joining us are Karen Engelbert and from the licensing team. Can I ask the clerk to confirm any apologies received for today's meeting and confirm attendance of those in the chamber and online?
Thanks, convener. We have apologies this morning from Councillor Anderson and also from Bailey Brock. We have two members online. I'll just ask them to confirm whether they can hear us. Councillor Mayer?
Yes, thank you. I can hear you.
And Councillor Robertson?
I'm here, thank you.
Thank you. All other members present in the chambers, convener.
Thank you, convener. We now come to the grant of a short-term let licence, new operation Craig Gower View, 44 Findlay Terrace, Pitlochry, PH 165 EU. Members, this application is page 7 onwards in your document pack. For this item of business, the applicant, Mr. Stephen Saint, has joined the meeting via telephone. Mr. Saint, can you hear me? Hello, Mr. Saint.
Hi, this is Stephen Saint. Yes, I can hear you.
All right, good. Thank you. The objectors to the application, Mr. Alexander and Mrs. Wendy Anderson and Mr. Graham Simpson and Mr. Susan Connon are not present today. I will now hand over to Moyna McLaren, who will introduce the report and advise on the procedures for the hearing. Thank you.
Objections have already been considered and heard with regard to your application for a 3-year short-term let licence. The committee has asked you to attend today because we just have a few questions just in relation to the management of the property. So I'll leave it to the committee just to ask you a few questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mr. Saint, I'd like to invite you now to provide details of your application and respond to the written objections. Thank you.
Okay. I'm unsure what to say at this time. Do I basically tell you why I would like to get the application, or?
Yes, please. Yeah, and if you could respond, you've obviously seen the written objections to the application. If you could just respond to those objections in mitigation. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So I've lived in Pitlochry all my life. I bought the house after I had to sell my previous house because of divorce. I bought this house at 44 Findlay Terrace as a home for myself and my 10-year-old son. After lengthy custody battles, I've incurred over £30,000 in solicitor's fees, which I have to pay. And the reason that I've applied for the short-term let application is so that I can try and find some income to pay for the solicitor's fees. Otherwise, me and my son will lose the house. The objections, half of the houses in the street are holiday homes. One on either side of me they're not occupied, and they're only occupied it very few times of the year, so I don't really see the issue with coming with any comings and goings in the street. So yeah, that's pretty much all I can say.
Thank you. Are you happy to take questions from members?
Yes.
Okay. Do members have any questions for Mr. Saint? Councillor Allen?
Thank you, Mr. Saint. A couple of the objectors are basically suggesting that there's no facility for day-to-day problems if there are issues or problems arising at the property. Can you maybe address that for me, please?
Yes, so I hope, well, if I'm successful with the application, I will be moving in with my fiance, who has Rosehill Guest House in Athol Road, Pitlochry, which is less than 500 yards away, so I will be available 24/7. As you know, I'm an electrician, so any problems that arise with the house, I can be there within 5 minutes, and I have a lengthy list of tradesmen that I work with on a daily basis that can appear if there's any plumbing issues, electrics, anything like that. So that's well covered.
Councillor Braun?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Brina. Thank you, Mr. Saint, for appearing with us today.
Thank you.
Just following on from Councillor Allen's question, the local neighbours, do they have a contact number for you? I would say particularly for the people who have objected, but do local people have a number for you to ring you just in case there is a problem?
Yeah, they have. We're actually in contact quite a lot. Although they have objected, I still remain friends with them. So I can understand that they have objections, but there is no animosity there whatsoever. They have my mobile number, and all the neighbours text each other quite frequently.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Saint? Can I just ask the clerk to the committee if there's any questions online? Unfortunately, I can't actually see on my computer. No, there are no other questions for Mr. Saint. Okay. Mr. Saint, would you like to just sum up? Thank you.
I don't really have anything to sum up with other than I would be living in very close proximity to the property. I have good relations with the neighbours. For instance, I'll quite often pop in next door and turn their water off, let them know if there's any issues. So I would like to think that would continue. I do favours for them, and they will ask me to do things for them as they would probably keep an eye on the property for me. There is no issue as far as the objections go. I understand where they're coming from, but I don't really see any need for not allowing me the let, so that I can basically keep a hold of my house for me and my son.
Okay, thank you. Do members wish to adjourn for discussion? No, thank you. Thank you. My motion is to grant the licence. Do I have a seconder? Are there any amendments to the motion? No amendments. Thank you. Therefore, the application is granted. Do you understand that, Mr. Saint? Have you heard that? Okay, thank you.
I would like to thank you. I would like to thank you all very much.
I will now hand back to the chair. I've now hand back the chair to Bailey Williamson for the remainder of the business on the agenda today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Good morning. Members, we're now moving on to item 5, which is a grant of a short-term let license for 13 Grey Row, Rutherford Field. Members, this application is page 21 onwards of your documentation pack. For this item of business, we are joined in the chambers by the applicants, Gail and David Taylor. We're also joined in the chambers by objectors to the application, Caroline Carter, Jane Hamilton, Brenda Pound, Mark Perman Charles, Kimberly Travers. A further objection was received from Ingrid McIntosh, who is not present today. I will now hand over to Mona McLaren, who will introduce the report and advise on the procedures for the hearing.
The normal procedure in these cases is that you'll get an opportunity to speak to your objections. So you have to, basically can refer to the objection already made, not add any additional information, but sort of stick to the objection you have, explain your position, and the committee will then ask questions about your objections, and then as the applicant, you'll have an opportunity to respond to the objections, and also you can add information like why is it you're seeking the short-term let in the first place, if you could explain to the committee, and then the committee will ask questions of yourself, and then as the objectors you get an opportunity to sum up your position, and then you yourself as the applicant will also get an opportunity to sum up. That's about it.
Thank you very much. Could I advise the objectors that the committee members have received and fully reviewed a copy of all your objections prior to the meeting. It is requested that you keep any explanation of your objection to no more than 10 minutes. Additional grounds for objection or representation should not be added at this time. Only the grounds of objection and representation included in your initial submission may be referenced. Could I invite Caroline Carr to provide details of her objection?
I'm Caroline Carter. I live at number 15 Grey Row, so I'm directly next door to number 13. My objections focus mainly on 2 grounds, one of which is the shared services that we have, i.e. the septic tank, shared road, private shared services, so we have to maintain and upkeep those private services. The second part to my objection was the loss of the community feel. I did press the button, I'm sorry. So what did you? Right, okay. Did you, what did you hear up to? Cool, okay. So yeah, out my front door, past number 13, through the shared close, into the shared back lane, past the entrance to garden 13, past the entrance to garden 14, into my garden number 15. So when you're in a close community, we've got 20 properties, we all know each other, we know each other very well. In that shared space, we know who's going to be there. So there's a security side of things and an understanding of who we all are. And we all live together in each other's space, and we all work in that way. So we know how we speak to each other, and we know how we can work around each other. My problem, I mean, I'm going to leave the septic tank to others because they'll explain it far better than me. But my problem in terms of the shared community and the feel of the area is that if we don't know who's next door, we don't know who's going to be in that lane, we don't know who's going to be in that garden, and it's going to make us feel, it's going to change the community feel. It's going to change how I feel about going to my garden. It's going to change how I feel about taking my dogs to my garden because we've got to go around the block, and it's going to completely change my feeling in that community. So those are my objections in a nutshell. As I said, I will leave the septic tank to others who can explain it better than I can.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Okay, Councillor Braun.
Thank you for being with us today. I was going to ask you a little bit about the septic tank, but I won't because you're not going to talk about it. Just for a matter of interest, these are all flats we're talking about. Are they communal entrance, or do some of the ground floor ones have their own street entrance?
That's it. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me. That's fine. Yeah, the ground floor flats have front door entrances, and the upstairs flats have up the stairs at the back, and they have their own door at the back. So we all have our own entrances.
Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, could I invite Jane Hamilton to provide details of her objection? Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I've put in extensive notes in my objections already, which you have available to read through. I'll elaborate on a couple of those. First of all, I'd like to point out that by Perth and Kinross Council's own criteria, this does not qualify for a short-term let. You argue, or you state that if a short-term let changes the character of a neighbourhood, it does not qualify, and in this case that would certainly apply. As Caroline has already discussed, this is a small, close-knit community. There are 22 properties in the row with a couple of other cottages and houses nearby. There's no commercial businesses there. Almost everyone either owns, or there are some renters as well, but there's no other short-term lets around. There's no people coming and going. So this would significantly affect the community there. If a commercial business was to come in, which a short-term let would be, this would significantly change the character of the neighbourhood. I would second Caroline's concerns that we're concerned for privacy. So I live in number 14, which is the property above number 13. There isn't a shared entrance, but there are shared spaces in terms of the road to access parking, the tunnel to access the gardens, the lane in front of the gardens, and the gardens are all very closely put together. The garden of number 13 looks directly into our bedroom. I'm not particularly comfortable with the idea of strangers coming and going, able to look in on our house easily without me knowing who they are, and having any say over who gets to come and go in that situation. The car park for number 13 also looks into our home office, and you can see into pretty much every window in our house from the communal areas in the property. You are living on top of each other in this community, and that works for us because you get to know people and you learn who lives there, you learn how to be polite, how to look out for each other, and you know everyone on the row. But we're not going to know people who are coming and going, and that would be quite a significant change to the property. Following on from this, if the short-term licence was granted, we would be concerned about decreasing the value of our property. We don't want to live above a short-term let, and I'm pretty sure other people won't either. So this would significantly affect the value of the property that myself and my partner Mark live in. Similarly to Caroline, I'll leave the sewage system for others to talk about. Mark is a big part of the community on the row. He helps to maintain the sewage system. He was the chair of the Residents Association. We have a Residents Association for the row that help to maintain and work to maintain the row. Brenda is now chair. Mark was chair for a couple of years previous to that. Similarly to the sewage tank, which others will speak of, we have a privately maintained road. Residents pay into a joint fund to help to maintain this road, and if a commercial entity was around, with people coming and going, this would mean that there'd be extra wear and tear on the road, and the residents would be liable to that, just as we'd be liable to any damages to the sewerage system. I think those are all my concerns in terms of the road itself. I do think it's significant to mention that we're in a housing crisis at the moment. There is about to be a new development in the Ruthvenfield area of about 300 properties, and this is arguably meant to be to provide affordable homes to Perth and Kinross Council and to people who wish to live here. A major justification for that is the greater housing capacity that's needed. So if 13 was approved for a short-term licence, you'd be removing an affordable home in the area and turning it into a holiday let. So it seems hypocritical if this short-term let licence was approved to be doing that when a new development is about to be built on prime agricultural land around the Ruthvenfield and Hunting Tower area in order to increase housing capacity. There are about 1,000 second homes in Perth and Kinross at the moment. There's about 2,000 short-term lets that have already been granted in the area. I would argue that Perth and Kinross does not need more affordable housing. It needs fewer second homes and fewer short-term lets. Perth and Kinross Council should not be approving any short-term let applications in the Ruthvenfield Hunting Tower area, in particular, considering that this community and neighbourhood is going to be bearing the brunt of these new developments. To second that, affordable homes are quite hard to find in Perthshire. Grey Row has affordable properties that are perfect for first-time buyers, low-income households, people living on their own, small families, and retirees. It's well located, there's both primary schools and secondary schools in the area. They're ideal houses for single families or single parents for small families. And if you were to take another one of these properties out of the housing pool, move it into a private short-term let, you're exacerbating the shortage of affordable homes in Perthshire. A final thing I'd like to note is that there are not any demonstrable economic benefits. There's not likely to be any economic benefits to the community having this short-term let. We're on the outskirts of Perth. There's plenty of hotels and places to stay in Perth. The only people that are likely to benefit from this are the owners of the property and Tesco around the road, where people are going to be coming and doing their shopping and cooking in that home and then going on walks and not really contributing much to the local area. There's no benefits to this. And as you can see, there's strong opposition from the community on the row. So I would ask you to please reject the application.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. I would just like some further clarification on the allocated parking. Is there a specific number of spaces per cottage? If so, how many? And also, how are they designated in any way? Are there numbers on the bays that you can park at?
Yes, pretty much every property has 2 parking spaces allocated. Number 13 has 2, and those are next to ours, and they're allocated.
And are there any sort of spare parking spaces that have got no allocation for guests or visitors that are coming to visit?
Not really. There's a primary school down the road, and there's a couple of spaces in front of that.
By number 1, that's technically there.
Right. Okay.
Then
no.
That's going by there.
Parking can be quite a tight squeeze. There's a football field nearby, and whenever people come and play on that pitch, the road gets completely congested and blocked. So there's certainly not a lot of parking around.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, convener. I say thank you for being here today. Just want to carry on from just to clarify 2 points. One is Councillor McPherson. When you say you've got 2 spaces, are they actually allocated in some way, numbered or named, or in some way?
Yes, they're allocated. Up to a certain point, every single house on the row has 2 parking spaces, and they're all in a line. So one after the other, each property has 2 allocated parking spaces. Most of them are labelled. I think 13's recently relabelled them because it hadn't been with the previous owner, but they are visible.
I'll just clarify because the lady just long was shaking her head, so I'm not sure here. Sorry.
I was just going to say some of the flats only have 1 parking space and there's 2 cars in those spaces. So like it can be a little bit of a squeeze sometimes for people, like 2 individual people living in a 1-bedroom flat with 2 vehicles. There are sometimes like shared spaces. So my neighbour downstairs from me, he only has 1 space. He's sharing that with someone else just now. Like, so yeah, it's an agreement, but there's not that there isn't always like a perfect amount of parking for the residents already.
I appreciate that, but the spaces, they are allocated to each flat. That's what I'm trying to clarify. And the other point I wanted to raise was about the maintenance for the road. You said, I just want to clarify this, you said the residents are liable for that. Would it not be the owners who are liable? I mean, I know most of you are residents and owners, but if somebody was to let the property out, the owner would be liable as well. It's the owner who's liable, not the resident. Would you just clarify that?
Yes. So we have the residents association. So I'm just using the term in that sense that it's the residents. But yes, that would be the owner of the property, whether they live there or not. Yes.
Councillor Allen, Councillor McPherson. Okay.
Thank you for your deputation. Just to follow up on Councillor Braun's question there. Number 13, does that have 2 spaces allocated to it or 1? Thank you.
I'll try and be as clear as possible on this. There are 2 allocated spaces for number 13. These are labelled and they're between us at 14 and whoever's next along.
Could I just get some clarity for, there's been a question raised about PKC policy about short-term lets, and I believe it's merely concerned with planning and not licensing, which is a different committee in itself. So Karen, could you just provide some clarity for us, please?
You had made mention about, you had made mention about 13 Grey Row being ineligible for short-term let by PKC's own guidance on the matter. That does relate to planning and not the short-term let license itself.
It's a different committee, so they have different policies to what we have to judge this application on. So that's a different argument again. All right. And the other question was about the road. Moynihan, could you comment on the road for us as to where we sit with the road if it's a private road? Would that be a civic matter?
Normally, issues such as private roads, title deeds, that kind of thing would be a matter that you would take up elsewhere as a civic matter. It would be something that would be considered by the committee.
Karen, you want to expand?
I just wanted to expand a little bit on that. Perth and Kinross Council does not have control area. If a control area is brought in, such as you see in Edinburgh, that is something that that may be considered for a short-term let application. But at the moment, there is no such control area within the council area. So planning is not a consideration at all for short-term lets.
Okay. And that probably answers the question, goes on to about the housing shortage question too. That would be probably more of a planning thing than it is for us. Okay. Are there any further questions? I apologise. Do members have any further questions for Jane Hamilton? If there are no further questions for Jane Hamilton, could I invite Brenda Pound, please?
Hi. So I'm relatively new to the area, but I am now chair of the residential committee. So I live at number 5. It's from when I first moved there, it's very obvious that it's a very, very close community. We all do live in each other's pockets because of the way we live above each other. So I'm on the ground floor, number 5, and we have a close that you have to go through, as Caroline mentioned. So you can't get to your garden without going around somebody else's house and round the back and into the garden. The private road, as both have said, it's really important because we have to maintain that. So it's our committee. I know what you've said about, you know, whose responsibility it's our responsibility as owners. So anybody that's coming up there needs to be cognizant that we have to maintain that road. The parking is very important because although they are dedicated spaces for you, and they're usually right opposite your house, so in twos, as you said, there are occasional ones that have got a one place. The ones at my end are not numbered at all. So I've not seen numbers on them. So if somebody was coming into a short-term let, they tend, you know, anybody coming in that doesn't know where they park, they'll just park anywhere. So it's important that it would be noted that these are the dedicated parking spaces. And there are 2, as you said, for number 13. And I noticed that it did say Bluebell Cottage. Well, we're not cottages, we are flats. And it is number 13. So the septic tank, all I'll say from that is like Mark to pick up on that one because he looks after it for us on our behalf, even though I now manage the committee. That is absolutely critical for us at the moment. If people put the wrong things down the toilet, we are in trouble. And then we're talking about digging up roads, digging up fields, very expensive, and that would be at our cost. So all of the owners are very well aware of what we do. So if it was a short-term let, people come in, there might be a notice up saying don't put nappies down or wipes or whatever else, but that doesn't mean they'll take any notice of it because they're in and out. And it doesn't matter it's only 1 or it's only 2, we're only here for a couple of nights. That could completely mess up our system. So that is really, really critical. I think that is one of the biggest problems for us in the row. But we are a very small community. As I said, everybody knows everyone. And for people to go, especially when they live very close to them, to be passing, looking through the windows, all of the windows as you walk along, you can see through everybody's windows. You don't want to have your curtains closed all the time. You know, it is really important to us that we stay as our community and that we don't get a short-term let. And I think all the points have been covered that I've made. The notice that was put up, we didn't know about this request for a licence. I thought we'd perhaps get a letter or something, but somebody saw it as they were going for a walk on a telephone pole up the road, not near the property at all. It wasn't covered the first time, so it just disintegrated and was on the floor. So we wouldn't have known about this had somebody not noticed that it was on a telegraph pole up the road. So that was important for us as well, that it felt like it was a bit secretive. You know, they could approach us. We've offered for all owners to go on a WhatsApp group so that we keep in communication. We have email system. So we want to be open about things. And this has not been an open application with our community. And I think that's really important as well. And I think that's all I've got to say at this point, and happy to answer any question.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Harvey.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. Just to get back to the sewage system, so you're obviously the local experts there. How fragile is the system? Sorry. Oh yeah. Just from a kind of technical perspective. So if it's quite fragile, how old is it? How is it maintained presently? Just some background on that would be interesting. Thanks. Sorry. Okay, come back to that then. That's okay. Sorry.
Are there any further questions for Brenda? Councillor Allen?
Thank you for your deputation. Bit of a strange question, or at least I'm going to ask the question and you can deal with it as you need. We've all got windows and we all have people walking past. I'm just wondering why you think somebody from a short-term let would be any different to anybody else who generally don't look in people's windows. They just get on with their day. Thank you.
That's a very fair point. I wish I could actually describe what the road looks like, because it's a narrow road which just takes car width going along, and the flats are just one big long building with all of the windows. We all know each other, so you might wave to somebody or whatever else, but people who walk their dog or something, or they're staying short-term let, think, I wonder what theirs is like, and they start peering in windows, and they do. So we don't want that to happen. I mean, have you got a better answer for it? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's what will happen. It will happen. Okay.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Braun?
Quick question. I don't want to get involved in the technicalities about septic tanks at the moment, but you did mention that if there is a problem, it's a matter of all of you to sort out. But just to clarify, when it's all of you, it would include the applicant as well, as is the owner. But he's the owner. Yep. Sorry, I'm just asking Mr. Pound at the moment. No, sorry, it's directed to yourself. Sorry, yeah.
So the responsibility of the owners. We're there, we live there. So if there was a problem with their particular toilet, to do with the sewage at the time, he's not living there. So how do we get access?
Chan.
Thank you, Convener. You mentioned the WhatsApp group. Can you tell me if all owners are on this WhatsApp group, or who's missing? Or
Sorry, the owner of 13 is not on the group. Sorry. Yeah, everybody's invited. Not everybody's on it. Not everybody does WhatsApp, but those that do use IT, some of them are older. Some don't want to go on it because they don't use WhatsApp. But we'd have email as well, and also we're so close to each other. We're talking all the time. We put letters through the door if there's if they're not on the WhatsApp and we want to notify them. There is lots of ways. I knock on the doors, talk to people, put note through the door. So there are many ways of communicating, but the WhatsApp group's very quick, and so we do use that extensively.
Okay, are there any further questions? Okay, if there are no further questions, could I please invite Mark Berman-Charles to discuss sewage?
The septic tank guy, yeah. So my name's Mark. I live at number 14. I own number 14. I am the person who is primarily responsible for looking after the septic tank and the communal sewage system. This is a voluntary thing I do with the help of other residents on the row. To answer your question, the septic tank is over 40 years old. It has been grandfathered in. It is incredibly fragile. We had a full survey done a couple of years ago. It's old clay pipes. It's functionally fragile to the point where 2 years ago we had a catastrophic failure when someone accidentally put 2 sanitary pads down, and that cost us in excess of £6,000 to deal with. We had to dig up in the field to access pipes running under the field. We had to do extensive work throughout the system to clear it, to actually identify where the blockage was, because the blockage had run all the way through the system and was getting to the point where someone's house was flooded. Number 13 actually had to replace their floor because it was flooded by sewage water, and we all had sewage. Number 3, yeah, Angie's, yeah. Oh, 3, sorry. Number 3 flooded, yeah, that's worst case scenario. However, there's day-to-day maintenance as well. So I do that because we're all accountable to each other. We all understand how we need to use it because we live there. That's resident owners such as myself, or renters who also live there. We have a couple of rented properties, which is absolutely fine because those are people who actually live in the community and understand what is required of the system, and we know them. We're all accountable to each other. I end up arms deep in other people's sewage when the system blocks. I do that because we have to look after the system. That is something that I do because I recognise that without the community maintaining the system, no one else will, and we can't afford, if there is a blockage, which does happen, even if someone hasn't put anything down there that's incorrect, the pipes are so old, this happens every 3 or 4 months. So it's one of those things where there is day-to-day maintenance by the community that is required, which I lead on, and I look for volunteers on the row who live on the row. So when there is an issue, things happen very quickly. If the system backs up, we have to act within an hour or 2, otherwise we will have sewage backing up into our toilets and into our bathtubs, or in some cases actually flooding people's houses. So that's the sort of subtleties of the system and the fragility of it, which is just completely unreconcilable with a commercial unit. If you're running a commercial unit on a community owned and maintained asset, that doesn't work, because we are ultimately then, if there is an issue, the community is bailing out that commercial asset, and that for me just doesn't work at all. I give my time to do this because I want to look after my neighbours and the other residents, but that doesn't work if someone's visiting from England, clogs the sewage system, and then I'm essentially trying to identify, say, a sanitary pad or a wet pipe in our extensive private sewage system. I can answer more questions on that in a minute, but that's my main position on that. I think another thing for me is, obviously this is a residential area. It's a small community. It's been mentioned before. There is very little privacy. Like I say, our bedroom window is overseen by multiple gardens, changing in the morning, that sort of stuff. You accidentally raise the curtains too early and suddenly everyone's looking into your business. So there's an element of decorum. There's an element of understanding where to look and how to walk on the road that we have all practiced and gained proficiency in over time. That is something we do almost subconsciously now, but I think everyone here will agree there is a way of doing that where you respect other people's privacy, because I can look into anyone's rooms, kitchens, bedrooms, bathrooms even. You know, you do have to be mindful of people, because these are buildings that were built almost 200 years ago for workers' mills. You know, these are cramped conditions. This is from a different time. We like living there. We understand that. So we have to work around that. And I think that's really important. I think the other thing for me is disruption. If number 13 lights incense, I know what flavour it is. If they use a spray in the bathroom to perhaps get rid of a nasty smell, I know about it. All the houses will have this, one up, one down. So if you're doing something below, that affects the property above, and vice versa, regarding noise, all these sorts of things. So you try and be considerate, you try and work around each other, you try and understand that you're living in a closely packed community, and that comes with certain things that you just have to be mindful of. And if you are coming as a guest for a weekend, for a couple of days, you have no awareness of this, you have no understanding of that. That is going to have a significant impact, and that is something that I, again, just don't see a workaround in terms of changing the nature of the community, of the property. That becomes an issue. I think, in addition, I am a first-time buyer. I know Kimberly is as well. We were very fortunate to have the opportunity to live on this row. It was very, very difficult to find housing. Even rented housing in Perthshire is almost impossible at times, especially 1 to 2 bed properties. So, you know, make your money, but rent it. I've got no problem with that. Then there's someone that we can actually deal with, that we can teach how to use the systems, that we can integrate into the community. I've got no issues with that. I've got no issues with someone renting it, but a short-term let is a completely different proposition. And I think it's important to highlight that difference. I think obviously the road has been discussed. Again, that's a community-owned asset. We've discussed why that maybe is not particularly germane to this particular council or this particular committee, but I'm happy to talk about that as well. I think that's generally it from me on the whole. Like I say, I'm happy to answer any further questions on the septic tank as well, because that is the thing that I'm primarily responsible for looking after.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question. You said there's £6,000 to repair the sewage system. Is that £6,000 per property or £6,000 individual? Sorry, for the entire work.
So that is shared across the properties, across the residences. We have a fund we pay into through our resident association fee, but that is for a variety of things. The septic tank is one of them, but yeah, this cost was essentially, we've not financially recovered as a committee from that. We are still trying to refill the coffers after that. So that took a significant impact to the community fund that we have.
Sorry, Councillor, I know you're not wants to ask a question. Is that 6,000? Sorry, what is your expected annual outgoings on maintaining that sewage?
So emptying costs in excess of £1,000 a year. So that is just emptying the septic tank for the community. We currently do that once a year, but if there was increased usage in certain properties, that would have to be looked to be increased. We have had to do it twice a year at times. You're looking more at £2,000. Prices are going up all the time for this sort of thing too. There have been also times, obviously, well, how much is my time worth and other people's time in terms of that day-to-day maintenance or week-to-week maintenance that needs to be done. I'm not going to try and quantify that, but there have been times where we've had to bring in sort of more professional help, drain experts, that sort of thing. Dyno Rod, you've seen these sort of companies available. They charge by the minute essentially. So there have been times where we haven't had the equipment to deal with a smaller blockage. We have to bring in an expert. That can cost, £500 a visit again, So there is a significant just day-to-day over the year cost associated with maintaining it. But if something does go wrong, that increases very, very quickly.
Sorry, Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. If you just indulge me, there's a couple of questions here. You mentioned that number 3, I think it said, had to replace their flooring. Does that become an insurance for the individual? Does it become a cost to you all? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened is the septic tank failed during a period of heavy rain as well. So the actual exit points on the road, because the sewer system and the drainage system are combined. So when it rains, that goes through the septic tank as well and then runs off through the foul water pipe. The system blocked. So our road flooded because that's connected to the septic tank, which was blocked, and then a mixture of rainwater and sewage water flooded into our house. So that ended up being an insurance thing. But obviously that was then an increase in insurance premiums and all that. So that was her insurance, private insurance for the property. But that again, that was not guaranteed as well. There was a while where they were arguing the toss on that.
And the other point that you brought up was the fact that generally all the residents pay into this fund. Does number 13 pay into that?
Yeah. So there is a community fund for the Residents Association. There is a monthly fee because we are not on main sewage. We obviously have to maintain our own sewage system. So the road, the sewage system, the drainage system, and a couple of other more sort of ancillary things are maintained through a monthly fee from all the residents or all the owners, if you want to call it that way.
Thank you. And final one from me. You took me straight off my train of thought there. I'll come back.
Okay, Councillor Mayor.
Sorry, I'm going to have to chat my question because my dog's just suddenly decided to start barking. I do apologise. My question was going to be to Mark, and it was to ask, how long does it normally take you to get people out to clear one of these blockages when they occur? And when they do start, how long does it average take them to actually get the work done?
Yeah, of course. So we actually had a blockage about a month ago. I noticed it and started working it on myself immediately because I was fortunately working from home that day. And then after about an hour, 2 other residents who got home from work were able to assist me too. So we are able to spot these things quite quickly, but it was getting to the point where our sinks and bathtubs weren't draining. So there was, a limited period of time before that would have then been from not draining to coming back the other way. So I think that's, it entirely depends. If it rains and the system blocks, the clock's a lot shorter in terms of available time. If it's just the system that is blocked because of sewage and there's no rain, we've got a bit more time. But if you've got adverse weather conditions with that heavy rainfall, like we had a couple of years ago, you end up with a catastrophic failure and there's nothing anyone can do about that. And then that leads to obviously serious damage to properties. So it does depend, but like I say, we have a couple of people on the row who do work from home who do notice if something appears to be going wrong. So then we do try and react quite quickly.
Just as a wee follow up to that, if it was one of these more catastrophic, incidents that you've mentioned earlier, is there a possibility, you could be more than a day where, you were affected by this?
Yeah, absolutely. So there have been periods, even without the catastrophic failure, we've had to essentially ban people from using the loo for extended periods of time, using the shower. Nothing can go down the drains or down the toilet we had half a day once. When it catastrophically failed, we did have to stop, essentially advise people not to use the system while it was being worked on, and that was a number of days. We had sort of periods within that where we said, okay, you can use the loo now for a window, but we're still working on it. So it really does impact people's ability to actually use the facilities in their own homes. We obviously, I say this as a volunteer. Obviously, I'm not king. I can't dictate whether or not people go to the loo, but we do have to try and, if we are fixing something, make sure that the problem isn't being actively exacerbated as we're trying to deal with the problem. So there can be significant periods of disruption for people on the row.
Thank you.
Do you wait and we'll pick you up at comments? Would that be okay? Because we'll come back to you to sum up. Okay. Let me see. Councillor McPherson's next.
Thank you, convener. My question is just about what, in the situation where you have friends and family and guests staying with you, do you have sort of signage or in the toilet to notify them of the risks? Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously when people are visiting, one of the first things you do is when friends or family are visiting, the first thing is essentially all that can go down the toilet is bodily secretions and toilet paper. We also have a bin in the bathroom for anything else that anyone would wish to use. I think that's the case for most residents, but obviously we are also there keeping an eye, not in the bathroom with them necessarily, but keeping an eye on what people are doing and reminding them. If you've got just someone staying in a house unsupervised, they'll see a sign. It's a slightly different situation. So yes, absolutely. People make mistakes as well. This is the thing that has happened. Like I say, when we had this catastrophic failure, that was a combination of things. But part of that was 2 sanitary pads. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, but that ended up being the root of the issue. So sometimes people can just forget. That's okay, but it's having that day-to-day risk of people unfamiliar with the system, unfamiliar with the property, disregarding something. That's then more of an issue. But yes, when we have people visiting, we need to be pretty alert to what they're doing as well.
Thank you. And can I just ask, just so I get an idea, roughly over, say, a 12-month period, about how many incidents would you say that you're involved in sort of emergency maintenance?
I would say about once a quarter, so for a year. I think this year I've had 3 so far, so I'm really hoping we don't get another one. We're currently trying to, we're going to be paying to have the system hosed out, just as a precautionary measure, because that we suspect there are blockages or small blockages right now, reducing the flow. The system doesn't appear to be draining entirely properly, so I expect another one is due if we don't take precautionary measures. But I would say about once a quarter. If it freezes, that causes problems. If it's very hot, the system essentially loses, all the fluid evaporates, so things do not flow, so to speak. So you have to take conditions into account as well, which can be it's very frustrating for everyone who lives on the row, and we're very, it's an imperfect situation, but it's the one we're dealing with. So there's a lot of things you have to be keeping an eye out on, and conditions can change, and then suddenly the system blocks. But on average, I'd say about 4 a year.
Okay, Councillor Chan, followed by Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. I'm just wondering, because you maintain daily and weekly and check on the system, what happens if you go on holiday or leave?
So obviously I'm the lucky guy who checks it on a regular basis, but there are a couple of people who are very familiar with the system in addition to myself. So if I'm away, I usually drop someone a message and say, look, I'm away for a week or two. Could you just do a once a week check just to keep on top of things while I'm away? And if there is something wrong, obviously then take action. So yeah, like I say, I lead on it, which I'm happy to do, but there are other residents who've lived on the road for a long time who understand it as well and are able to see if something is suddenly going in a direction we don't want it to be going.
Councillor Allen, followed by Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thank you. Back to the sewer again. You mentioned that you had an event where sanitisation and sanitary products caused an issue, and if somebody puts their hand up and say that was me, that's easy to deal with. How easy is it to apportion where the responsibility lies if somebody doesn't do that?
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. It's like I say, part of it is having those relationships to keep each other accountable. We operate a no blame sort of policy on the road. If something happens, we deal with it. It's not there to tell someone off or, single them out. But if someone has done something wrong, we do try to have people sort of own up to that. On that occasion, we were not able to identify who it was. We suspect it was a visitor on the row at the time. There were multiple people with guests at that time. It's an easy mistake to make, but it's not constructive when you've got a community asset and you're looking after something that you will use to sort of have a sort of a snitching culture, shall I say. We deal with the problem as it is, and if someone is going to admit to that, that is fine, but ultimately we deal with it as a community. So we try not to apportion blame unless something outrageous has happened, because like I say, we're all mindful, we all make mistakes. Everyone has you can't be perfect all the time. So it's a very delicate balance, sort of maintaining that relationship with your neighbours, because ultimately you're all talking about each other's poo at the end of the day.
Please don't induce the sniggers. Right, who's next? It's Councillor Robertson and then followed by Councillor Braun.
Thank you, convener. I've been listening carefully to the discussions that have been taking place, and it is very concerning if the obvious vulnerability of the sewage system serving the properties. Can I ask some advice of the council solicitor? Are the concerns expressed by residents a valid reason for refusing this application? If the committee is not happy with their current sewage arrangements, is that a reason for refusing the application? Thank you.
In terms of, considering any issue, in terms of, refusal, you're considering the location, character, condition of the premises, the nature and the extent of the proposed activity, the kind of persons likely to be in the premises, the possibility of undue public nuisance or public order, public safety. These are the issues you're considering. So whatever, issues you are being raised, you have to consider them within that context. Yeah, I can't say.
You've sort of danced around that question, if I might say. Are the objections with regard to the private sewage system a valid reason for the committee to refuse this application?
That is not something for me to tell you. It is something for you to consider within the context of the legal tests.
Can we get back to you during the private session, really, on that? And
That would be helpful, because I'm truly confused, and I think it's important that we don't mislead the objectors to I've looked at the legislation carefully, and I can fully understand their concerns, but I'd just like clear public advice on where we are with this.
yeah, I think we can get back to you during the private session and then take it forward from there. Is that okay? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Gavina. Thanks for your presentation. I note here in one of the other objections mentions that the septic tank is actually shared with Tarry Row as well. So, that's me.
Is it on? Okay, sorry, that was my mistake. I put that in my, I thought it was shared with Tarry Row. As I said, I'm a newer resident and it isn't shared with Tarry Row, is it?
The runoff is, so the foul water runoff does connect with the Tarry Row system. So the septic tank isn't linked, but the runoff is. So the end product, essentially where you can end up with blockages, is connected, but it's not the same septic tank system. It's ancient. It's really confusing. I'm sorry. It's hard to sort of explain. Like I say, that we work off of designs drawn in the 80s as well. It's really hard to know what's going on, but the runoffs are the things that are connected.
If I just follow on that, so in effect, there's no contribution to problems from Tarry Road.
No, we actually cause the problems for Tarry Row if the runoff blocks. If we block it, they end up getting problems too, but not for their septic tank itself.
I've got a question, two questions, I suppose. One is about, are you actually on a private water supply? Is it public water supply?
Fortunately, we are on public water, so it's with private sewage system, but public water that we pay for our council tax. Yeah.
Second to that, therefore, is are there any plans in the future to connect your sewage system onto the public supply, or is that geographically not possible?
So that is something we have explored, because obviously we would all love not to be on this system, but there doesn't seem to be any practical way to do that. I've spoken to Scottish Water on a number of occasions, and there doesn't seem to be any plans from their end, and there's not really any way we can encourage them to connect us. So there is no. There's also the cost could potentially be prohibitive, because our sewage system is on private land. Scottish Water aren't necessarily inclined to connect us to the mains out of the goodness of their own hearts. There would be considerable cost to each member of the community, far exceeding any community fund that we have, which is not large right now. So it could end up being prohibitively expensive to do that.
Thank you. Could I now invite, if there are no further questions, I'll take it no further questions. Could I therefore invite Kimberly Travers to provide details of her objection? Thank you.
So most of the main points have obviously been covered, so I'll just touch very briefly on the points that I had made. The main point for me was obviously the disturbance. You know, I don't live above number 13, but from my point of view, I can hear my neighbours boil their kettle. If they were making a smoothie, I can hear the blender. Like, the noise travels. They're very old buildings, and certainly like noise does travel far. I'm an upstairs flat, and like I said, downstairs, like, you can hear a lot of the noise. Excuse me. Televisions being loud, music being loud. Obviously, we all are a community, so I know I'll apologise to my downstairs neighbour if I have something going on upstairs, and then likewise for downstairs. Our gardens, we all border onto each other, and obviously, you know, one of the important things about these properties is they have large gardens that we all enjoy spending time in. And I know for myself, I'm 2 gardens away from this property, and I know that I might not enjoy spending time in my garden if there is like strangers drinking and doing stuff. You know, you can't control that, so who knows what they'll be doing. And certainly that would have an effect on me being able to enjoy living in my property for the reasons that I chose to buy it for. Obviously the car parking has already been discussed. when visitors are on the row, like my parking spaces have been blocked multiple times by random people parking in them. I don't have my parking spaces numbered. That's my issue, I know. But it is something that happens often. The school, when there's stuff going on at the school, people do park in the street already, and it does cause a nuisance already. Obviously that's again something that will be detrimental to myself and other people living on the row. Obviously we've covered the septic tank, but just to touch on that, it is something that we all have to think about. I had someone staying in my house recently when I was on holiday pet sitting, and it was literally the first thing that I had to tell this person was, do not put anything down the toilet. That is not toilet paper. It is an important thing. And I just think you cannot control what people do. If you're staying somewhere for a short period of time, why would you care? You're going home tomorrow or the next day. It's not going to affect you if the toilet blocks up. And if it does, it's not your responsibility, whereas it's our responsibility. It's kind of a trivial point, but again, it is something that will affect my life. My car parking space is directly sort of in front of the entrance to number 13, and I have to go through a close to get to my stairs in the back. I have multiple dogs. My partner has 2 children. It sometimes can be stressful for us getting in and out of our property as it is, having the distance between the car parking and the front door. There have been residents living in number 13 obviously prior to this, and I know that it can be stressful sometimes getting in and out of the property, my property, having strangers, about that area. Like, it's just something that makes me a little bit anxious, thinking about people that I don't know, who knows who they are, trying to get in and out with dogs that are, noisy, barking. It's just another thing that I love living there. I love living in the property. We all have such a nice community feel. We all know each other. We all, anyway. But it does just make me a little bit anxious knowing that there'll be strangers there, and it'll be burdening my life having to make sure that that everything mainly has been covered. But that's just my points.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Braun.
Finally, thank you for the presentation again. Something you mentioned, and I think it's been mentioned by several people, is this question of sort of the insulation between the flats, for noise and for smell. So, is this insulation quite thin? I mean, you mentioned you're above somebody, you have to apologise if you make some noise downstairs, but is that the same longitude as well? I mean, the walls between are they that thin that you can hear things going on?
I would say if your neighbour's like directly beside you, you don't really hear too much, but from downstairs you do. And I know that, like, if my neighbour downstairs has a dog visiting, I can hear that dog barking. And I know for me, I have dogs and they bark, and I'm always very apologetic to my downstairs neighbour if there is something going on. But I literally can hear her kettle boiling if she's making a cup of tea. I've heard teaspoons, if she drops something, I can hear it from down the stairs. Obviously, they are very old buildings, and I am not qualified to know, like, specifically the insulation and things, but I do know, like, your neighbours beside you, I don't hear a thing. Like, the walls seem to be very, very thick. I don't hear my upstairs, next door neighbours. However, downstairs, I hear a lot of stuff, and I'm sure she probably hears a lot of stuff from me as well.
Okay, are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, could I please invite David Taylor to provide details of his application and respond to the objections received?
Morning, everyone. If I can outline a little bit about the market that we're operating in. It's not nearly as intrusive a process as it might sound or be perceived in terms of running a short-term let. We are advertised through Sites Cottages, and not Airbnb or anyone like that. 75% of the guests are couples engaged in the outdoor style holidays, walkers, etc. The remaining 25% tend to be people working in the area that prefer to stay with us rather than a travel lodge or something like that, so they can cook for themselves, enjoy a garden or something like that. The point being is that in the main, the guests are holidaymakers who will not cause any problems in the area. They're there to enjoy themselves and relax. 13 Grey Road will definitely not be a party pad or cause nuisance in the area. I understand people's concerns. We've had guests from all over the world and never had a problem with neighbours. Visiting guests are overwhelmingly eager to learn and explore the area and spend money in the local economy. There are 2 pubs within walking distance, and obviously Perth Centre is just 2 or 3 miles away. We charge a good housekeeping bond of £250 per guest, which is non-refundable in the event of social or material problems at the property. We've never had to use it in 3 years of business so far. We have a similar property in Newborough with a 4.8 out of 5 customer rating and great relationships with the neighbours as well. To give you an idea of footfall when people come into the area, we were looking for possibly 1 or 2 guests per month, and for a period of a week at a time. We won't be doing any 3 or 4 day short breaks. So probably, if we could get up to 18 stays per year with ourselves and our friends and family using it in between, which we have been doing. Regarding the property itself, to provide holiday accommodation, both Sykes and the council insist on us providing documented proof of compliance with the following safety measures. PAT and EICR tests are carried out on the electricity. Carbon monoxide and smoke alarms are fitted and linked. Legionnaire's disease testing is carried out. Fire safety assessment carried out. Gas safe inspection plus public liability insurance of £5 million. We have a HETAS approved installed brand new stove, and it'd be quite interesting to see how many other properties in the street are maintained to this standard. After our purchase, the property initially failed the EICR and gas safety reports. The previous developer must have cut a few corners in the installation of the boiler and the electric works. The property was actually unsafe when we bought it. We've carried out numerous remedial works to make sure we're up to date with everything now, and we've passed all relevant inspections and documents that we provided to the council. It's probably a good thing that we took the property over, because if there had been a gas leak or problems with the electrics, they wouldn't have been found by anybody else, because we had to do the testing to be able to put it on the short-term let. Let's see, the developer also neglected to pay his share of the second chimney repair, as we are well aware of, with Mark and another neighbour having to pay for that. Also, the internal chimney breast in the first chimney was dangerous. We had to rebuild that and replace the old dangerous stove at considerable cost, making the building overall safer for all residents. What we have is a well-maintained safe building that will be kept to a high standard going forward. The paying guests will enable us to keep the standard of the building up. They will also report on the condition of the property and gardens to Sykes, so we must keep that level up there to attract visitors. We've also tidied the landscape the garden, adding to the overall feel of the row, as before it was an absolutely neglected area. As part of clearing the garden, I had to remove kennels, rabbit hutches, and the remains of dead animals within those hutches. Deeply unpleasant, as you can imagine, but it certainly improved the garden. The total costs that we've spent after buying the property have been over £13,500. And obviously we need to try and start to recoup that money. We're responsible owners and will manage the property weekly, like our other one. We're also in contact with Mark by email, and also obviously we're open to contact from all the other residents of the row, and more than happy to discuss any issues around it. I'm just going to move on to the objections. The first objection was that the application notice for the short-term let licence was deliberately placed away from the property for nefarious reasons. This is absolutely not our intention, and speculation around this is unhelpful and detrimental to the community. As part of the consultation process for the short-term let, we were explicitly told to not place the notice on the property, but on street, preferably on a telephone pole, which is what we've done. The time placement was a photograph and sent to the council and approved as a good and proper placement. I replaced the sign on the 15th of October as it became damaged previously. I don't know how that happened. The second objection was about the septic tanks. that guests may not appreciate the age of the property and therefore cause a blockage by putting inappropriate materials into the system. This could be true of any visitor to the row, and obviously it's happened many times in the past as well. What we do is in the welcome pack for the guests, you put the rules and regulations of the property, and that will be featured heavily in there. We also have a physical sign on the toilet itself, just to highlight when they actually approach the toilet, that the way to use it properly. We've got a big sign there. If there are any issues, we have the good housekeeping bond that we can use to help regarding the drain unblocking. The third objection was a general one about people coming and going. As noted, this will not be the case. In terms of pure numbers, we're looking for 12 to 18 bookings per year, a potential 36 adults who we have full records of and who have agreed to a good housekeeping bond. We have our friends and family using it also. The fourth objection was about taking the property off the market that could possibly be used for social housing. A typical social housing unit probably would not be a 230-year-old C-listed cottage flat on a private road with a garden. It's just not really appropriate for the social housing market at all. That's a council-driven solution. Wear and tear to the road. Well, obviously with only 36 adults, so around that using the road, it's going to be significantly less than people on the road itself that have 2 or 3 cars and use the road daily, day in, day out, year in, year out. You have quite a lot of downtime on use of the road, and we actually pay for the road anyway as well. We put in the monthly fee for maintenance and pay our fair share. So it's arguable that we will use the road less than any other owners, with a single car being used infrequently. I hope I've addressed the objections fairly and offered reasonable explanations of why it will not be a negative or intrusive process for the other residents of the row. That's what so far.
Before I open it up to any questions, could Karen, if you want to comment?
I just wanted to comment on the public notice. The notice was originally put up in the window of the property, and we asked the applicant to repost the notice, as legislation requires that the notices are posted on public property, so that those seeing the notice don't have to enter private property at all. It was reposted. There was a complaint received that it had got wet, and so the applicant posted it for a third time in the correct place, which was on a telephone pole at the junction with the nearest public road. So just to clear that up, that the public notice was posted correctly.
Thank you. Could I ask a first question? You mentioned at the beginning, and I hope I picked you up right, that have you been operating for 3 years? Okay, thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Can I ask how many of the other properties you've been in?
I've been in any of others.
Thank you. On that basis, I was wondering how you could surmise that your property is higher maintained and better condition than the others.
Just because of the EICR report, I don't believe anyone else has to do that. It's a condition report on the actual state of the electrics. So I don't know if everyone else does that. I wouldn't have thought so.
Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Convener. I was just wondering, will we have any guidance rules on dogs? Do you let the property to dog owners or not? I was just wondering, do you have any rules or guidance on dogs? Will you rent the property to owners of dogs? So do you allow dogs into the property?
Sorry. Yeah, we allow dogs. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. I just wanted some clarification about the garden. It sounds like you've renovated the garden. What sort of use do you anticipate letters having on using the garden? Have you put tables and chairs in? Is there a bench? Do you envisage that they'll be having barbecues? Thank you.
I put a bench up at the back and a seating area about halfway down with a barbecue, so people can enjoy the garden.
And does that include things like, is there the facility to barbecue or?
Yeah, there's a little barbecue area.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, the question, I think it was one of the objections relating not to social housing, but to renting on the private market, which is a question I would have anyway. Can you talk me through why you've decided to go with the short-term lets rather than renting on the private market, for example, which would address some of the objectors' concerns? Thanks.
We might have to do that if we don't get the license. But it's a business for me, so it's my business. So that's why I've recently started in the last 3 years. But yeah, if it doesn't go through, I'll have to rent it private.
Yes, sorry.
And sorry, just to clarify earlier, you said you rent another place in Newborough. Is that the only other place you rent out in this? There's no other ones, right? Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Braun.
Yep, thanks, convener. Thank you for the presentation. Can I just check? Have you obtained planning permission for a change of use, or have you checked if you need it? So I was asking, have you obtained planning permission for change of use, or have you checked whether you need to get planning permission?
I don't believe you need to get planning permission for that.
Have you checked though? Because it is a flat.
I can't remember if I've checked, but I must have checked before I started doing the business model. So I would say yes.
Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, could we invite Caroline Carter to sum up, please?
Thank you. I wanted to make a comment on the septic tank and how we fund that. All properties do contribute to the fund, but it's not just about the money, it's about the additional risk, I think, that we're concerned about. So whereas we're all contributing 13 as well to the cost of any works that need doing, it's the additional risk of having folk who are not as committed to the property and the upkeep of the septic tank. That is the concern there. So that was one point I wanted to make on the money. It's not about the money necessarily, it's about the level of risk. Also in relation to how we clean the septic tank and the pipes if there's an issue, although we can't rely on Mark being here all the time, the rods are in accessible places. We all know where they are. So, we can all get the rods out and get out there and be shoving it down the pipes, so to speak. And that's something that we do as a community. We have to do that, and it's not really the most pleasant of tasks, if you can imagine. So I guess the point there that I want to make is that if we have these blockages fairly regularly, with all of us being incredibly aware of it, how many more blockages are we going to get with people who are not aware of it? That's the level of risk that I wanted to highlight. I did want to pick up the social housing aspect. Nobody mentioned social housing. We mentioned affordable housing. These properties are 120, 130. So it's affordable, not necessarily social. That's the point I think was being made. And the last one I want to say regarding the state of that property is there's a history to that property, to the residents who owned it previously to the prior to the one who updated the property, who bought it from, I think it was from an auction. I'm trying to find the wording, but the people who lived there before were a problem to the row. They did not upkeep their house. They did let the garden go. And it was something that we were all very aware of. So the state of that garden is not indicative of our properties and how we look after our row. So I want to make that point quite strongly. You know, we do look after our properties, we do look after our electricity and our housing. You know, I actually found that quite insulting. So I'd like to finish there. Thank you.
Okay, could I please invite Jane Hamilton to sum up, please?
Yes, so there's obviously been a lot of talk about this signage, and the owners of 13 seem to think we're implying they have deliberately obscured the postage of the signage. We can get into details on this, but the basic point is there's a residents association, there's a WhatsApp group. They could have made it very clear to us that this property was going up for short-term let, and all they did was post this sign in what we have collectively considered as an obscure place. So there's a reason that we're focusing on this. We don't feel that they're engaging with the community in good faith. They have twice lied to my partner here, saying that they only intended to use the property for their friends and family. This is why we're angry about this, because they've been deliberately hiding what they bought the property for. Just to make that clear. To second what Caroline was saying about the sewerage system, yes, they are contributing to the fund, as any other owner is, to maintain the sewerage system. But the issue is that if you've got commercial guests staying in that property, and they might say that they're only attending a couple a year, but they've already lied to us about other things. So I don't really necessarily believe that. If you suddenly have all these different people coming, there is an increased risk of issues happening. So even if they're contributing to that fund, the cost might go up from £2,000 a year to £6,000 a year or more. We might be going from 3 or 4 blockages a year to a blockage a month. So that is the problem there, rather than that they're not contributing to the finance of that system overall. The owner of the property before the current owners was a commercial landlord who bought the property at auction with the intention to do it up and sell it at a quick profit. The way that that landlord managed the property is not indicative of how the residents and owners generally manage the properties. So I think that's kind of irrelevant to this case. Yes, the property is in a better state now than it was previously, but that is, I think, quite frankly, irrelevant to this situation. As Caroline said, nobody mentioned social housing. We're talking about affordable housing. It's quite difficult now to buy a house if you don't already have a wealth of resources to get on the property market. My partner Mark bought the property on his own, on a salary and a conservation job, which you might not be familiar with, but is not highly paid. That is difficult to do. So it is significant that you've got properties like this that are nice to live in for an affordable cost. So it's nothing to do with social housing. And finally, planning permission. Planning permission is required for this property. When this postage was first put up, I started looking into things to try and understand what was going on. I got in touch with yourselves to put in objections and also to raise concerns about how things were handled. It then transpired that planning permission had not been requested. I got in touch with someone at the planning department. I can't remember his name, but planning permission is required because it's a flat, and they are aware of that because I told them. I had to send properties of the house to the planning department so that they would understand that it was a house and not a cottage, because the application was put in called Bluebell Cottage. A flat, not a cottage. The application was put in under the name Bluebell Cottage, which, as the man in the planning department quoted, somewhat pulled the wool over their eyes. So planning permission was required, and I was the one that had to raise this rather than the owners.
Okay, thank you. Not sure about calling people a liar. Okay, you may disagree with them, but please could you avoid calling people a liar in this committee. Next thing is Brenda Pounds, sum up, please.
I'd like to point out I do have an EICR report, and I also have all of the other things. So as far as documentation is concerned, it's up to everybody in their own flat what they have. But when I bought this flat, which was only just a year ago, I had all of those reports done. And I have my boiler serviced, and I have a gas certificate, and I have the EIC report. I have the alarms all linked. So everything that is mentioned, no, I don't let my property, but I do want to make sure it's safe. And therefore, I don't care whether it's been let or not, my property's safe. It's very well looked after. I've had knew everything. And we do all maintain the properties. I mean, some people have been there for many, many years, and perhaps they don't look quite as up to date, but you know, they're very, very old. My neighbour, you know, she puts her washing machine on, she works shifts. I know what her shifts are, so I don't put my washing machine on when I know that she's sleeping, and vice versa. So you're absolutely right when you were saying that you can hear everything because they put the kettle on or whatever. The walls on the sides and the back, absolutely solid. They're about this thick. But the up and down insulation is very, very limited. So for anybody that was staying in number 13, the people above will hear exactly what's going on. You can hear conversations, you can hear the television. So that part of the insulation is quite poor. But they are very old and very, very thick walls. So you don't hear the next door neighbours, but you certainly do above. That's really the point I wanted to make. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to say, when anybody new comes to the row, from a committee point of view, we have a pack that we give out. So I go and meet, we have a new neighbour that just joined just at the top of the row. So I went to meet them recently and explained that I'm the chair of the committee and explained about the committee and how it works. We give them a pack. It's very clear about the septic tank and about the road and about the parking and about the community. We invite them to join the WhatsApp group and have the email, and they can come and knock on anybody's door and ask for help. And it really is, as I said, I've only been there a year. This is the closest community I've ever lived in. So I'm retired there. And so that's what these flats are absolutely ideal. First time buyers and retirees downsizing, absolutely perfect. All beautiful gardens, very close to each other. You can wave across. So fabulous community, and we want it to stay like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Mark Perman Charles to sum up, please?
Yeah, I've not got a great deal to add. I would just say that when I bought the property above 13, it was in a terrible state as well. I've spent in excess of £20,000 on doing up the property, so I don't think we necessarily talking about how much we spend on a property to make it nice. Well, that's part of looking after a property. I'd like to point out as well that as part of that, I had to completely replace the electrics and get that signed off with a certificate because they were essentially condemned when I bought the property. So again, buying a property and doing it up, well, that's part of it. You buy it as seen with the home report. So I don't think that's necessarily relevant to saying, well, a short-term let is better than someone looking after their home and trying to make it a nice place to live. I think the other thing, just in terms of contributing to the community fund, yes, we all do, including 13, which obviously is fantastic and important. However, if this short-term let were to go ahead, they're the only one making money out of that as well. They're making money off of using community maintained assets. The rest of us are paying into a fund to live here. That would be a property that is paying in a small sum, £15 a month, not a great deal, into a fund to then make money off of the property. That's a fundamentally different dynamic from the other 21 properties on the row.
Okay, thank you. Kimberly Travers, could I please sum up?
Just to sum up, I have obviously some concerns now about letting the property out 18 times a year. That's like less than half of the year. This is a business for this individual, so I struggle to believe that. I find it a little bit offensive to insinuate that we don't look after our properties. We all take great care of our properties. They're old buildings. You know, you can't determine from the outside what everything looks like on the inside. I don't think that should be taken into consideration, frankly. I've spent a lot of money. You know, I was a first-time buyer, buying on this row. Also, I have concerns about extra dogs being on the row. Those of us with dogs, and there's many of them on the row, we all keep them on leads in shared spaces. I know I'll have to adjust my lifestyle now, knowing that there'll be extra dogs on the row, potentially not being kept on leads in shared spaces. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I invite David Taylor to sum up, please?
Regarding the planning, I will certainly look into that and get the retrospective planning if required. Regarding affordable homes, the last one that sold in the street sold for £150,000 for a 2-bedroom flat, or a 2-bedroom cottage flat. That's not affordable home. 3 beds for £100,000, I would think is more of an affordable home. And having a large garden that needs costs a lot to maintain as well. So these are not things that are really in the affordable home sort of situation. We're really fond of the road, despite what's happened today. We put a lot of time and money and effort into number 13, and we've used it as a home from home, and we'll continue to do so when we see fit. But to be told we're depriving people of affordable homes is kind of disappointing. It's discriminatory, I feel. But that being said, I'm sure it's something we can all move forward from going forward. But yeah, I'm just sad that it's sort of come to this. The idea that we're hiding our intentions or whatever. No, we bought the property to use it as a holiday home, and if we can generate some revenue from it, part of a business, then I don't see the problem with that. We've spoke to everybody, spoke to Mark numerous times. We know the neighbours upstairs well. Spoke to Caroline, stroked the dogs, chatted to them, and then they've sort of come out now. It's not us that's been hiding, it's these guys have been hiding. The true views that no one's ever said to me any of this stuff. This all came out as an objection when I put the notice up. No one said anything about it before. We've got on well with everybody, so it's just a bit disappointing. We're definitely not going to be running it. Sorry. Yeah, so we've obviously spent a lot of time and effort on it, and we're not multi-millionaires. We're trying to earn some money, earn a living. I've got a young son. We all enjoy going up to the flat and stay there. We've stayed there lots of times. Parents have stayed there, friends, cousins, all that sort of stuff have stayed there, and never interfered with anybody. Obviously, there's a bit of noise coming through, but noise coming from downstairs is particularly noticeable. When Mark puts his washing machine on, we actually have to leave the house. So it does cut both ways. We need a bit of give and take, and not just the row demanding what I do. I mean, I'm a sovereign person. I want to earn a living as well as provide a nice service to people and get along with everybody. I don't see why we can't do that. And people would love to come to that area and stay there for a week. They would absolutely love it. It's beautiful. You can walk to the pub, you can have a cup of coffee, you can have a drink, and stroll back through the woods, and it's a lovely part of the world. And it's given people that would never normally have a chance to live like that, to live there for a week and enjoy it and take the stress out of their lives. And they might come from all over the world. And you might meet people from Japan or I've had people from Norway, Japan, Canada, France, Morocco, staying in the other one. And they would speak to people and tell them about, their lives, about what's going on. It's quite an interesting thing. That's what I found out talking to the neighbours at the other one. It's a vibrancy about the community rather than just if I just put a long-term renter in there, it could be anybody. It could be problems with that person as well. So there's the chances of there being problems with somebody staying for a week when I know who they are, I know their names, I know the contact details. We're going through sites. They paid me £250 in advance, so they say that they don't have any, they won't cause any problems. And obviously, I'm at the end of the email for Mark. And the other guys, I'm a very approachable guy, so I can't see there being a problem. It's not. It's been built up as to be the people wandering about everywhere. It's not going to be like that. We're looking at 12 in the first year. I would say it'd probably be about 12 visits per month, per year. Sorry, and we're already doing that anyway because we stay there that amount of time anyway. So it's frustrating. I don't want to upset anybody or upset the row or any of these things. And obviously, having done it for 3 years, we know what it's like, and we know how to control the guests and offer the guests a really good time and make sure that they fit in as much as they can in the community. So it's I can't see that it's been built up far more than I think it should be. But obviously, I'll make every effort to get the planning permission sorted out if it's required. And thank you.
Okay, thank you. I take it members will wish to discuss, adjourn for further discussion. Okay, thank you. If you'd wait on for a few minutes. Sorry, we're just waiting for one of the councillors to join us online again. Billy, we're just waiting for Carol. Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. My motion is to approve the application subject to conditions. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Are there any amendments to the motion?
I have an amendment, convener, if I may. My amendment is to refuse the licence on the basis of category C1. That's the condition and the character of the premises. I'm very concerned about the vulnerability of the necessary facilities required to service the flats. I think they're susceptible to severe damage, and therefore I'm moving to refuse.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
I'm happy to second that amendment.
Thank you. Could I please carry out to put a hand over to the clerk to carry a roll call vote?
Thanks, convener. So we are dealing with item 5 on the agenda, which is the grant of a short-term let licence at Bluebell Cottage, 13 Grey Street, Ruthvenfield. We have a motion proposed by yourself, seconded by Councillor McPherson, which is to approve the application with certain conditions attached. We have an amendment proposed by Councillor Braun, seconded by Councillor Carr, which is to refuse the application on the basis of category C1. When I call your name, if you can indicate whether you're voting for the motion or the amendment. Councillor Allen.
Amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Councillor Carr.
Amendment.
Councillor Chan.
Amendment.
Councillor Frampton.
Amendment.
Councillor Harvey.
Amendment.
Councillor McPherson.
Motion.
Councillor Mayer.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
And finally, Bailey Williamson.
Motion.
I have four votes for the motion and 6 votes for the amendment. Therefore, the amendment will carry.
Thank you. Unfortunately, your application has been refused. Okay, members, we're going into recess now. Can we return for 2 o'clock for lunch?